So another level deeper that describes why we are more deeply than we thought.
Wait, what was that again?
I'm excited. I just love bleeps.
bleep,
I just
bleep.
love multiple bleeps
Yeah,
in a row.
lots of
Sorry,
bleep.
sorry. Guys.
I'm gonna have to remember
Sorry.
that.
Whole section.
So the reason why we are in deep doo-doo is that all you watchers out there, I know we're talking about the damages of social media, but please don't stop participating in social media and don't ban your kids from using social media, because about 10, maybe 15% of my retirement fund depends on you continuing to use social media.
Yeah, that's right.
So I hate it, but I feel like it's my responsibility to prop up my own retirement fund with the technology companies that have held us captive. So that is why we are so
All right, so Zach, you're coming off the documentary, The Social Dilemma, which we were talking about today. It's on Netflix. For those of you who haven't seen it, highly recommended by the group. I would highly recommend it. I thought it at least stimulates a lot of thought about my social media use and how it's affected me. There was a lot of things where I was watching, I was like, oh, that is like they are nailing it to a T, all of that. So let's talk about this. But you're coming off the high.
Yeah.
Give us your vibes.
Lots of stuff. I think initially, at least during the first 45 minutes of watching it, most of what I felt was a little bit of embarrassment, fear, shame even. Because I don't know if this was something intuitive, or maybe I've just already heard whispers of these concepts before they came out in a full-blown documentary that kind of really dives into a lot of the different aspects of social media that are scary. But lately I've had a thought in the past year or so where I'm just you know what? I think that there exists information about me that if for whatever reason somebody who had access to it wanted to exploit it, all my dirty laundry would just be out there. Dirty and clean and good, all of me in data form would just be able to be pulled up and just be what is Zach about? And what does Zach do? And what is Zach interested in? What are Zach's behaviors? So to watch this documentary is kind of like knowing that you have a wound, or you're infected. You're that character in the movie who's it's fine. It's not a big deal. And it just keeps getting as you're watching it, you're just oh, this might be a bigger deal. And then it gets to a point where it's almost like they take the rag that you've been using to cover it up, and all of a sudden you're just oh, there's maggots, and oh, it smells it gets ugly. And in some ways, one of the biggest takeaways that I had from it was you know what, I think we should probably get comfortable with ourselves, because it talked about pretty much a global addiction and how it's kind of been fashioned that way. So I think most of us can probably say we've experienced addiction in some degree. So we're all sort of in a form of social media recovery, hopefully. But that was the biggest thing to me. And I know it's not all of it for me personally, but a big prevailing experience for it was just people know stuff about me that I don't know, that a psychologist with 200 hours with me couldn't know. And it's just interesting to know that information's out there.
Yeah. Are you guys users, avid users of social media? By the way, I say users. Remember that quote? One of the big quotes was, there's only two industries that call their people users. Their customers users.
Narcotics.
Yeah, narcotics and social media. And software, I guess. Yeah. But, yeah. So, are you users of social media frequently? Is that a thing you do?
Facebook a lot at the beginning, Facebook a lot less in the last 5 years, but more Instagram. I think Instagram is probably the social media thing that I use the most. I've dabbled in Pinterest, liked Twitter a lot for quick news. And then I think that's kind of a lot of it.
Yeah.
I have a proposal, actually.
Yeah.
I have a proposal that all of us, I think there's an app. I downloaded it today called Quality Time. Assuming that you only use social media on your phone, it'll tell you how many minutes every day you are using Facebook and Instagram and all the social medias. So I think it would be really cool if we
that would
could
be cool.
download it and a week from now
report.
come back. So I downloaded it, and I would say I don't have TikTok or Twitter or anything. Basically it's just Instagram and Facebook, and I think I average about 25, 30 minutes a day on social media, which was more than I expected. I think it's probably gone down quite a bit in the last couple of years. I also followed that trend of like more Facebook and then less Facebook and more Instagram, and now it's like equally. They're both like going down simultaneously.
Right.
But I do I still think there are benefits to social media. So I don't see myself ever doing like, you know, how people like do a fast for 30 days and then they upload it again and then they're on it for like 3 hours for the next
like
month and then they
constantly.
do another fast. It's like the perennial dieter, right?
Right.
I mean, I still think there's benefits, and there's a reason why, most of us are scared to just walk away from it cold. But
So in order to, for me, I don't have the social media like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. I don't have social media on my phone. The one I do have is YouTube, but I never use YouTube for like just scrolling to find another video. I just
Yeah.
use YouTube as basically a tool to figure out how to fix my car.
yeah,
So that would, like, if you had done that test for me maybe 5 months ago, if I had downloaded that app, it would have been interesting, because I think Apple has their own software that kind of tracks your screen time as well. And I remember looking one time and seeing, Instagram at, I don't know how many hours for the week, but I was like, wow, what a waste of my time. And I hadn't even like posted on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like during that week, no post, no engagement, no comments, maybe a couple likes, but like
Just a straight stalker.
just scrolling. You know what I mean? Total waste. Anyway.
So what is our time? So I'm 31, 32-year-olds 20 years ago. We spend X number of hours on average on social media. What would they have been spending their time doing that we today use for social media? I'm trying to understand, what is social media replacing? Because for me, I work 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I exercise an hour and a half a day. That exercise is pretty rigorous. So when I'm not working or exercising, all I want to do is kind of lay down and kind of be entertained.
Right.
So is social media taking up some of our entertainment time? Does social media take up in-person interaction? Like, 20 years ago, would I have had families come over to dinner several times a week, and we would have just communicated with our words?
No, boredom. I honestly think social media replaces boredom. It replaces meditation. It replaces quiet. Like a space where your brain doesn't have something to consume. And I do think that's a problem. Personally, I think that's a problem, because I think there's got to be time for quiet, time when you're not being fed a story or fed some kind of ad or fed
Reflection.
somebody's. Yes.
I have a premise.
Yeah.
So going down to the second to last question there, why does social media have power over us? I think humans as social animals have less social interpersonal social interaction right now, especially during COVID, than we've ever had in the past. I think there's a lot of data behind that. Johan Hari, he's written a couple books on depression and drug use and stuff like that. He cites a stat that several thousand people were asked, like, if you had an emergency, how many people could you go to for help? And the most common answer, is that the most common answered number was 0. And there's a statistic out there that I read a couple months ago that said like more or close to 50% of adults in the United States feel extreme loneliness or feel sometimes lonely. So my premise is, based on the Western society that we have, where success means I have this big yard and big house and do everything on my own, and people are outside of my zone, and I don't have a lot of interpersonal interaction. That is detrimental to us because we have a innate need for social interaction, and if we can't get it in person, at least we can have some type of artificial interaction on social media.
My problem isn't this, like, after watching that and viewing my past behavior with social media, so like I liked social media. I like to post things on social media. There is, like, I'm being honest with myself here. There was something to seeing a like, being able to refresh and see a comment, like those kind of things were important to me. Bothered me that they were important.
Social validation.
Yes, I wanted validation for like what I created, what I made. As soon as TikTok came out, someone was like, "You got to post your videos on TikTok." So I go post my videos on TikTok, and that became like an immediate addiction because then it was like, oh, you've got 1,000. Can you get 5,000? Can you get 10? And I was like, I really was totally addicted to
Kylo Ren. More.
Yes. and it would be like this thing where I'd pull out my phone, refresh. Oh, dude, there's more followers. There's more, and it seems like an inherently toxic the apps themselves, do you know what I'm saying, are inherently toxic. I get that people can use them well, but even those that are trying their very best to use them well still find themselves screwing up constantly with them, spending too much time with them. I mean, social media creators are now talking about, like, you've got people who literally make a living on social media saying, I don't have social media on my phone. What does that tell you about the apps themselves? Are they inherently toxic? And do they really create goodness? Like, I don't know. Do they create goodness?
I don't think they're inherently toxic.
Well, the president of
You don't think they're inherently
think so.
toxic?
you don't think
Okay.
inherent.
Talk to me.
I think it's not one or the other. But the president of Pinterest, that guy, he said, I think I agree with his opinion, which was they've done a lot of good for people. They've brought families together. They've created groups. They've brought awareness to certain social issues. But
Have they done more good than bad, though?
But individually, I think maybe they've done more harm, especially among teenagers and preteens, which is
doing harm.
what I think is the scariest thing. We might be able to adjust because we grew up climbing trees, and we're like, let's try to change out of this. But somebody that is like developing as a 9-year-old, jumping right into social media, they don't even know any different. That's like how you socialize.
And I don't think they were developed. Like, I don't think the apps themselves were developed in malice.
No.
That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, I don't know.
We're looking for validation.
Exactly.
in a kind of
We
way.
watched it
so
on
hypocr-
Netflix. Can
it's
we
so
just
hypocritical.
address that?
It is like, I hate social media. I'm deleting it. But like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, please.
Please share.
Which is why
Cut
I
that
think
clip. It's going to be a good one.
Which is why I don't think it's inherently toxic, because I think it is, in a simple way, just a modern example of how humans connect. So I don't think it's necessarily completely fake, because I think that, if in our case with the Latter-day Saint culture, we have missions that we served around the world, and you can not only talk to somebody on the phone a few countries away, but you can like see their family grow up.
Yep.
And it's been 10 years for most of us, so we literally have seen some of the families and people that we knew grow up or grow old, and it's really cool to
and
see.
like
And
just today,
and it
someone from my
feels-
mission reached out to me.
right, and it feels
Yeah, that's
feels
amazing.
real. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it's like disingenuous. Like I think that the connection you might feel to those people is very real. But I think it's all about like balance, which again is arguably maybe proposed as impossible because the technology has moved so far beyond human capacity to adjust that evolutionarily we're not equipped to handle this exponentially growing beast.
But there's that side of it, our ability not to be able to handle the social media and like what it does to us. But there's also the side where we're constantly giving away our information, data,
Yeah.
opinions, feelings, everything to some companies.
before
that can then use those as a weapon to either make you believe things that are totally untrue, or you know what I mean? Like, I heard Sacha Baron Cohen. I listened to this speech he gave about social media platforms, and his first line was, "If Hitler was alive today, he would be able to run 30-second ads on Facebook on how to solve the Jewish problem."
Targeted to the people who are most likely to buy into that message
and listen to it.
Right.
That's crazy.
See,
that's crazy.
I want, before we jump right into like where like the data they're collecting, I kind of wanted to draw an analogy that social media, you could say it's like money, where it's a tool that you can use for good and for bad, and depending on your habits with it, it's going to affect you detrimentally, or it's going to lift you to a higher status in every aspect of your life. But it's kind of like, I think it was a few decades ago when the NBA players had a lot of issues with managing their money because they were just thrown right into millions of dollars, and some of them went bankrupt after they retired because they weren't given a set of tools education-wise to manage that, to deal with it. And that's kind of how I see the kind of a younger generation just jumping right into it.
I agree.
And so, but the analogy goes further with the NBA players being put in the spotlight and everybody knowing their money management
is an issue.
I guess,
yeah,
as an issue, and their skills and talents in that regard. And that's what I see, maybe seeing it as behind the scenes. Social media is collecting all our data and our, I guess, money management habits.
I think it's
just
I think it's
either screwing it up or getting it better.
Like,
yeah,
I think it's our generation is going to do some really stupid crap that the next generation is not going to do. I mean, obviously we're in Utah, so it's a little bit different here. But every time I see someone smoking, me and my wife, we're like,
wait, what?
People still do that?
Right.
I think that's social media of today.
Love that smell. It reminds me of
It's
vacation.
interesting. Like you hear about the statistics of, preteen and teenage girls and the suicide rates just going up dramatically because of social media. I think that the parents of those teens and preteens are the generation that were just old enough that they didn't experience the brunt of social media themselves, because we, with social media at the end of our junior and senior year of high school,
right.
So we were the addicts of social media. We have seen how damaging it is, and going onto the question of should parents have social media rules, like I'm grateful at this point that I don't have teenage girls, but at the same time, like, my son's not going to be using a lot of social media.
Right.
I know
TikTok
that's
scares
not
the crap
very
out of me.
libertarian of me.
TikTok
on a family
scares
level.
the crap out of me because I feel like we've definitely discussions about the dangers of social media have been had probably for a while now.
Right.
But I think the social dilemma obviously, like I said,
Highlights.
brings it all together and like really kind of.
It was fun to
harps on
talk
it.
about before it was mainstream.
Yeah.
But like, so I and again, this could be the addict in me. I felt like I've been a somewhat conscientious consumer of social media. And I lose with TikTok every time. Like, I've deleted it and I haven't been using it for very long, but there is no app or thing that has kept me awake at night better than TikTok. And I think it might be like the culmination of like the
Never
AI,
been on
because honestly, because the
Short
interface
videos.
is just, you see a video and you can just scroll to the next one. Like, on that one, I don't even follow specific people,
Right.
but like it shows me like crazy sports, like hilarious stuff that makes me laugh. That's just like absurd and funny. Like,
Yep.
it's like I get so lost, and I feel like I don't have as much control over it as I should.
Right.
So it's good that I haven't tried it or downloaded it and don't plan to.
I think that this is a good segue for. I don't consider it as inherently toxic. I don't maybe see it as much as like smoking, but I feel like it's a new form of macronutrient in like in humanity today. So a form of digital connection that, like, you need connection, but like the digital variety may need to be limited. Like, and that it could even be based on like another concept of like there are certain body types and genetic markers that make you predisposed to be more efficient with digesting proteins or fats or whatever. So I don't think that there's probably like a straight line for everybody that is like the healthy consumption of social media. I'm sure there are people who would say 0 is healthy. But I think that maybe for each person it probably needs to be
varies.
tuned depending on how efficiently they process social media
Right.
and digital connection.
It requires self-reflection, and I think it requires a lot of
Control.
self-awareness.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
see, that's that's the concern about the younger generation.
They don't
it's
have
like
it.
being thrown a bunch of money without ever being taught anything
Yeah.
about money.
And that's what I would agree with. The problem is, yes, there's some of us who can be conscientious about our social media use. But
Like
I'm
me.
just telling, like Zach. What a profound example. No,
3 a.m. in the
yeah, 3 a.m. on TikTok tonight. No, but I just don't see how, if I was raised in an environment like right now, I wouldn't have the tools to be able to handle that kind of power, that social media power.
Yeah.
And I can't judge. I cannot judge that generation. I can't look at them and be like, oh man, if they would just get off their ding dang phone. Like, there's no way.
Well, I think as a
could've-
parent, you're going to have to though. Like,
I'm
and
not
I
gonna
would
have to
say,
judge them,
and
but I am
would,
going to have to set some boundaries.
but
for
that's
sure.
going to be based on your judgment of them, like of your individual kids. Which, as a parent, you're probably the most qualified person to do, right?
But what I'm saying is, if I have to, I don't even want my kid on social media until maybe 18. You know what I'm saying? Like, once you're an adult and you have learned how to control your social world, your real social world, you know, then we can start talking about getting onto your electronics so you can say whatever you want
But
on
yeah.
there.
But that's
See,
my
that's
concern is I think that, and again, I could be totally wrong here, but I think that there's an argument to be made that it is now the new real social world, the mix of digital media, digital connection, and real connection.
And I've thought about it, and there's an argument for saying, well, shouldn't you be teaching your kid how to wield that power from a younger age so that they're more prepared?
'Cause it could
if you
be-
go cold turkey,
Well, it doesn't have to be a binary all or nothing, right?
Right,
It can
right.
be limited to, hey, you can use Facebook and Instagram, but you can't use TikTok and whatever other else is out there. You can set limits in terms of time. I know there's some I've seen, ads for like Gab wireless, some wireless phone carrier designed for teenagers. I don't even know what that's about, but theoretically, like, could you give your kids a phone that the Facebook shuts down after 15 minutes of use and doesn't allow you to use it for the rest of the day? I mean, I think there's lots of ways that you could do it. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have is, even though we want to say you're not going to use social media until you move out of the house, until you're 18, my wife is in Young Women's, and she's told me that there are some girls in the ward who have a separate cell phone that their parents don't know about because their parents give social media boundaries, right? So, it's I feel like it's an all or nothing, where like all of us parents have to all be saying, hey, like, my child wants to be on social media because little Jimmy, Spencer's kid, that moron,
Yeah, he's totally
is
posting
on his
videos
phone
on social
all
media.
the time.
Right.
And so I think it's going to have to be kind of a collective, like, I feel like it's going to happen
see, but
I
here's
don't
the
know.
deal.
I don't know, man.
to some extent.
After we watched that show, after I watched The Social Dilemma with Jill, I turned to her and I said, the world's problems will be solved with parenting.
I like that a lot.
amen.
Like,
I like that a
quality-
lot.
Quality parenting, boom. Because I feel like, no, like, sincerely, there's
Yeah.
no other, like, if you get two quality parents who can, because every single kid is totally different.
Or one quality parent.
Yeah, well, yes, or one
Two would
quality
be
parent.
two's better than one.
Two
maybe.
is
Or a
better
really
than
good
one, but
nanny?
any quality parent that can really look at their child and analyze their behaviors and figure them out, the rules are going to be different for every single child. So you gotta help them.
So can we discuss that for a bit? Because that's a huge issue, not just with social media.
Maybe flirt with that
could just
topic
be
of
a
like
socioeconomic.
parenting. I feel like that's pretty broad.
Very
but
broad.
I think going along with what you said, with what both of you said recently, which was you said something to the tune of like, I don't know if they have the tools. I think that's a fundamental thing to discuss, because I think that, and I think that you probably meant this, and I'm just maybe using different words to say the same thing, but I think that essentially as humans, we do have the tools. And I know that we might be at a disadvantage with this social media technology machine that we've created, but I don't believe that we are completely powerless. So I think that we have the tools, but maybe we don't have like the techniques to wield our present day evolutionary machinery to kind of approach this issue. Because I think that the ending of the social dilemma, to me, I kind of disagree with a lot, actually, which was kind of like we need legislation on this. And I don't want to make this a political thing as much as it's about...
No, let's make it a political thing.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about it in more of like a beliefs about people than a belief about like politics, because I know that they're attached, but I think that if we were so powerless, maybe we wouldn't even be talking about this. And I know that it helps that we've had people on the inside say something, right?
Can I ask about the tools, though?
Sure.
So in a scenario, let's say I've got a 14-year-old boy. If I want to give him the tools and impose no boundaries of myself, what does that look like? What
impose
tools?
No boundaries of yourself?
Yeah, if I just say, hey, it's up to you what you want to do with social media. I'm not going to tell you.
I don't think I'd say that.
Okay, so that's not the argument.
No.
So your comment is, so parents should have an influence and a direction around how their kids use social media.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So they use it some of the time, so they can use it. But what tools do they need to be able to use it effectively?
To enforce it, yeah.
Right.
And there's
I think that's a
technology
great
out there.
topic for sure. I mean, but for me, it would be at least a balance around the real face-to-face, like human touch connection piece.
You know what I would do? Mm-hmm. I would get a hot tub and be like, hey, your phone is disappearing at 5 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Bring as many friends as you want over.
Right.
I think there's a lot of different things. But
American Idol season 42 is still running. You can do a repeat of us.
42. You're not that
like
young.
But I mean, so maybe not like with specific ideas, but maybe what would be a tool? And again, we're not experts, folks. But what would be some general guidelines or techniques to leverage the innate tools of our young humans?
But that
could be for us too.
That's what I'm saying is I feel ill-equipped.
Well,
I feel ill-equipped to be able to manage social media in an effective way. Does that make sense?
Okay, so interesting thing, a parallel with the video as well, because I think, sorry man, they talked a lot about how
clip it.
How what is it that
Indiana Jones,
that like social media has kind of removed like any natural coping with like boredom. So it's like it almost like it's like an autoimmune disorder where it's like you use social media to cope with boredom when maybe those moments of boredom are what help you to cope with the emotional issues that drive you to social media or whatever. So I don't know exactly where it's going with that, but I understand that feeling. But I mean, again, why are we not embracing our own humanity? Like at the beginning, I'm feeling exposed watching the social dilemma, and I'm like, man, if somebody wanted to find out about me and all the things I've done on social media, and I keep saying it with like this really negative thing, but there's an element to me that is sensitive to that. That like
all the porn stars that he follows,
like looking at pornography, like they could probably know like all the things I've looked at, and the creepy thing was how long I've looked at it. Think about the fact that you now have like the face cam on your phone. So like not only do they know that somebody's looking at something, but they know that it's exactly you.
They know who it is, and they know how long.
And
based on how long. See, that's what why I'm saying in the way that social media and the apps work right now, I will repeat it. I think they're inherently toxic.
And they're only going to get worse.
And they're only going to get worse unless there are some types of changes, whether made. And here's the thing. I think that because we're the product, everyone's the product, right? customer is always right.
The slight
So
change.
as long as people make the changes with their social media use.
Well, let me bring in.
Wait.
Wait.
Calm down, libertarian.
As long as people
haven't
make
said anything.
as long as people make the changes with their social media use, that shows these companies that this is not a good business model. That's when those companies can change. I don't know if there's
That's
necessarily
a way.
That's
I like that
something
way.
that I can
But
stand
feel
for.
I feel like we need to do better at learning how to manage it
Standing
and
up.
showing them that, like, I don't know. Because the way it functions right now, I do think is inherently toxic.
Let me
creepy.
bring up a different dilemma, okay? And that would be the international, like, because, okay, we might be conscientious of what's going on in the United States, 2 states away from Silicon Valley. But the
It's not a state, Jordan. It's not a state.
Silicon Valley State. Now you lost my train of thought, man. No, I think
How does social media play out in different
well,
countries?
so, yeah,
in different
like
places?
on an international scale, like say you go to third world countries and they're just getting the internet for the first time and social media and they're starting to get smartphones. They have a bit more of a issue, I think.
Here, you're bringing up a fantastic point, because this week I got on Facebook in preparation for this, and the first posts I see, and I'm not going to make any judgment calls or say any names, but there was 3 different people on my social media posts that posted this thing of big giant skeletons. Did you see this? Big giant skeletons next to excavators, human skeletons, and these were giants. And it proves that back in the book of Genesis, when they talk about giants, you saw this, right?
No, I didn't,
I
but
haven't
I've
seen-
seen,
I
I've
haven't
seen
seen
the
this.
thumbnail.
Yeah,
I've seen
I
the
haven't
thumbnail.
seen this.
So it shows up on my social media feed, posted by people internationally. You know what I mean? That would buy into that, and immediately my brain, bullcrap.
Right.
So I look it up. Sure enough, these are photoshopped photos. It's not real. You know what I mean? Like,
But these people
that
have
is not-
never been exposed to Photoshop, and they're seeing it
Exactly.
for the first time because their government they never had the opportunity. And then all of a sudden, smartphone,
Correct.
boom. And it's like,
So now
Dude,
their
perfect.
vision of the world is totally warped and confused, and they are being fed. Now they've looked at that. They actually clicked on it.
Right.
They went to the article.
And so as long
now
as-
Facebook knows that they went to that article. Next time they get on,
as long
You know-
as that market is big enough, then the social media companies aren't going to make some major adjustments just based off conscientious people like us.
so is it
That's
okay
what-
for
that's the
Facebook,
dilemma.
Instagram, whatever it is, to feed conspiracy theories and lies to people who are vulnerable to those things? Is that okay?
Is it okay? Who is
So-
going to say yes to that?
No.
So here's
So that's my point.
Right.
It's inherently toxic.
it's
That act within social media is
And now
inherently
then we could talk
Let
about the
me-
The
solution.
app itself is doing it.
so let me pose an idea or a response to that. So the libertarian response to that.
For real? I mentioned libertarianism at the beginning of these episodes, and if
Whatever
you've been
Zach
paying
is-
attention, I think he said the
I
libertarian
am.
word or variations of it at least 3 different times.
Let him speak. He's got that frustrated look.
Okay, so the libertarian response
Joe.
to
Libertarian and you.
Joe Biden. He just Joe Biden.
Dude,
he looks straight
Brian,
at
be
the
that. You're
camera.
the
careful.
worst president we've ever had.
Brian, be careful with this. If you're going to make a statement about libertarianism, I already told you at the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
So is there a libertarian mafia that's going to come after me?
Maybe just more informed libertarians that might correct
Okay,
you.
whatever. So the response that I feel like many would have is like, it's up to the market to decide, right? It's up to the market to decide whether, if there's too much manipulation, people will figure it out. They won't adopt the platform anymore. Problem solved, right? I think that's a nice idea in theory, but the people who have that mindset have to be okay with a full generation for 10, 15, 20, I mean, we're probably almost 20 years into the social media experiment at this point. We have to be okay for companies to essentially be able to manipulate us until we figure that out. And that's, a 20-year cycle that smoking happened and doctors lied about it and we all smoked and everybody died, right? And now it's social media And because we believe in free markets, we get manipulated for 20 years, then we figure it out. I like that idea in theory, like the people will decide, but it takes a lot of education to stay on top of that, and it takes a long time for everybody to figure that out.
Yes.
And so if we want that to be our model, that's okay, but we have to be willing for short-term damages to happen.
Right.
Which is thousands of
But
young girls committing suicide.
But I would say this though.
So you're for teen girl suicide?
Zach,
Wow. Wow. So I mean,
Zach is evil.
dude. So
By the way,
I'm not opposed to
libertarian.
legislation, which is something that they proposed. Fundamentally, I felt that there's not enough credit given to us to quote unquote figure things out. But I'm
Right.
not saying that that's the only way. And I think I said that earlier in the episode where I was like, that's a way, and I like it.
Right,
Like I said
right,
that
right,
specifically. But I'm not unaware of the fact that there is an impact that can be good that the government can do. So for those of you who are kind of feeling out of context, I've been dabbling in libertarianism. I'm really enjoying it, learning a lot. I won't even claim to pretend that I know how to be a consistent and sincere
Zach,
libertarian.
be careful. Be careful what you say here. Okay.
So
You
am
might
I
not
like
be a
am I in like an
libertarian.
echo chamber where what I did is what I'm
Is
actually
repeated back
talking
to you?
about, trying to qualify my forthcoming statement, and yeah.
Hey,
Just-
well, can I interject? We have to be careful with the legislation, though, because of what they were saying. There's like, what, 1 in 6 things that we see on social media are like real news,
Okay.
primary source.
Right.
real
So
news.
I want
And
again.
if
I want
the
to back
government has influence in any of those lies, then they're like, well, now we can manipulate, especially if it's a partisan
Election.
So
government.
again,
Yeah,
I
election.
still feel like this is
Russia.
more. Obviously, there's a connection to legislation that was proposed in the documentary, and of course we can go there. But again, I still want to make it about like humanity, like human nature, and just more, I guess, practical terms that I feel are appropriate to this discussion of 4 guys sitting in a garage talking about it. Which is, you mentioned that you feel like there'd be a lot of education. I agree that there would need to be a concerted effort to educate, but I think the education around social media itself is not complicated, which is what we've covered and talked about here, that we recognize that there's a problem. There's an issue with the way that social media operates itself. And in the documentary, it talks about how it's almost kind of gotten away from the developers and the programmers themselves, where they don't even know how to turn it off. Like, how theatric and cinematic is that? It could be. I mean, it probably is true. But again, it's not so complicated where like our techniques to use the tools need to be so nuanced and special, as much as it is like, how are we using our time? Can we look at an objective day and say, like, where do you want to spend it? And have an allotment for social media or digital connection and engagement, but don't let it take away from rigorous exercise. Don't let it take away from maintaining your lawn, because I've had entire afternoons get taken away from me because I get home from work and I'm tired and I just want to consume. But there, like the grit piece or just the discipline piece is fundamentally like a big part of a solution there. That's not complicated, and that's not something you like necessarily have to go to textbooks for. It's more like, hey, what are the techniques to leverage your own willpower to do things that intentionally?
So far, it seems like technology is an excellent resource to do that, which is why I'm very grateful that I was like born in the 80s, don't have kids until I'm 50. Sorry, I'm holding the mic a little far. Because by then, at least we'll have some kind of technology that will prevent my teenage
Sure.
girls from screwing everything up. And I'll be dead by then anyway, so it'll be great.
Abstinence for the good of humanity.
Do you
You're
have
welcome.
Beautiful.
do you have a
Teenage
Well
girls,
said,
you're
do
welcome.
you have the ability to edit a bleep in here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll beep it out.
Well, so another level deeper that describes why we are more deeply than we thought.
Wait, what was that again?
I'm excited. I just love
Bleep,
bleeps.
bleep,
I just
bleep.
love
Yeah,
multiple
yeah,
bleeps in a row.
lots of
Sorry,
I'm
guys.
going to have to remember
Sorry.
that.
That
So-
whole section.
So the reason why we are in deep doo-doo is that all you watchers out there, I know we're talking about the damages of social media, but please don't stop participating in social media and don't ban your kids from from using social media because about 10, maybe 15% of my retirement fund depends on you continuing to use social media.
Yeah, that's right.
So I hate it, but I feel like it's my responsibility to prop up my own retirement fund with the technology companies that have held us captive. So that is why we are so.
Because you own Google.
Hey,
you
Jordan,
own Google,
Jordan.
Facebook.
Please bleep out every single one of those.
I'm gonna tag your mother and not bleep them.
Hi, Mom. Sorry, all your other children have said that word many more times than me. So
Who is this, Mike?
So I don't know. I feel like there needs to be more responsibility taken by social media platforms. Like if I'm bringing this back to what they're presenting to people or users of social media, I think it's irresponsible to not screen information that is either propaganda or like socially irresponsible information. And like in my opinion, because I think a person who is vulnerable to that kind of information can buy into ideas and thoughts that don't paint an accurate perception of good principles.
Great segue, because I was wanting to talk about this too, and it'll be a challenge to talk about it. But there was a discussion in the documentary that talked about the inability of AI to like discern and sift through information to say like what is true. Mm-hmm. Which again, another existential topic that we can dive into, but that's really interesting to me because I had a couple thoughts that I don't know how they'll be received, but they use the flat earthers as an example.
Mm-hmm.
very valid movement, by the way.
So
it's pretty compelling stuff.
So this is interesting. This is interesting to
agree.
me. So why?
Round earthers got to you.
Let me just
Brian.
use an example.
They got
Let me
Kyrie Irving.
Spencer,
Yes.
why do you believe that it is true that the Earth is round?
Why do I believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Besides pictures and
Pictures, okay.
most scientific
Most
evidence.
scientists.
And everything in the sky is round.
Everything in the sky is round. What do you mean? Everything's in the sky is round.
The moon, the sun, the stars.
Okay.
It's all round.
Okay. Is it a sphere or is it round?
Well, we see a circle, which is 2 dimensions.
So
We
here's-
know there is more than 2 dimensions. What is a 3-dimensional object that looks like? What does a circle become in 3 dimensions?
That's
Can
fine.
I
That's
say
fine.
this?
That's fine.
Let me
Keep
say
going.
this: if you leave San Francisco, you can fly to Japan in either 5 hours, or you can fly to Japan in 2 days.
I've thought that
So
same
you know what
exact
I'm
thing.
saying?
How do
I'm
they
like-
not see that?
I'm like, so either the airlines are all in on it. All these pilots, they just fly in circles until they finally
But this is-
arrive in Japan. Like, come on.
But this is my point. Do you know that the Earth is round?
okay, let's not even go into this.
No. I'm only going to dabble in it because I am going somewhere else with
Everyone
it.
acts on faith all the time.
I'm going somewhere.
I
with it.
know this.
Here's what I would say. I would say that I know the Earth is round. I feel like I know the Earth.
I don't
Well,
even
the
know
flat
that I'm sitting
earthers
here
say
right
it's round
now.
too. It's just a plate. Do
Yeah.
you know it's spherical?
Ooh, do you know
You
it's
don't.
See?
Nah.
I don't know. But what do you?
Again,
I
for
do- I do
everything that
believe
you
it.
want to say to be conclusive, really from your own like tangible evidence,
Right.
like we don't have it.
Why is it important that we have to say we know? Why can't we just say it's, based on everything I've seen, I think it's a very high probability that
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So again,
I'd
I don't want
probably
to.
land
That's a
there.
whole
Zach,
other
can
topic that
you-
we can get into. But
Can you tell me I'm right a couple more times before you continue on with your
I
statement, please?
agree. I like the level of saying like
He's
it's a high probability
He
that something.
did it. All right, go.
What?
I'm just kidding.
It is so hard to know what is true, and I'm using this more in the context of social media because, we talk about these like third world countries and we're like, what are they like? I feel so bad. Like they're so vulnerable. Like, how do you know that we're not just as vulnerable?
I'm not saying that just third world countries are vulnerable. We all are just as vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
that is my exact point.
We are
is
just as vulnerable for different things, right?
Yes.
At certain levels of
different
education,
different
we are no
information.
longer vulnerable to have the desire to smoke because we have the level of education and the experience in our community that say that that's a bad idea, right? People in third world countries are just one step further back.
But I would say, do you know smoking's bad for you?
Literally, I was like, if somebody
but
wanted to
that's-
put their head to it, they could probably come up with some conspiracy theory
Definitely
that
could.
debunks that smoking is bad for you, and they could say it in a way that would be challenging to completely dismiss.
So you're saying even like all of that information should be available, even if most science proves smoking's bad. Most science proves that the Earth is a sphere, right? But you're saying that there should be the availability of information pushed out to millions of people saying, actually, no, it's flat.
I think
and
should
no,
be
smoking is okay.
Yeah, I think that should be is not exactly the right.
Ought to be.
Yeah, because I don't think it should be that way. But frankly, with this and many other things to life, like
is that
we
way.
can't control that. Like that's what's there. It's like saying like I don't want my kid to get infected, so he'll stay inside.
Right.
Like there's only so again within reason, which I know is still a hard kind of space to figure out for a lot of us when we talk about different things. But misinformation is very much a part of human life, and it's been that way for as long as information has existed. It's kind of like this proportionate reality that before social media, we didn't have a lot of the great things that it gives us, but with all the great things came equally awful things. And that is just us moving on through this human experience. And I don't think there's anything we can do about that. So it's not about stopping everything, but again, focusing, like you said, like in the family unit, like can you, or your tribe,
But I think
your
it'll
community?
be important. It'll be important to teach the next generation. There is information being spread on social media that polarizes people, and it'll give them
I wanted to
different
talk about that.
different extreme ideas, neither which are true. The truth is boring, right? Like it usually lands somewhere in the middle. So if we can teach that principle to the next generation, we're far better equipped as social media users of the future to be
Yeah.
able to say, oh, I don't need to trust
Yeah.
everything that comes up on my social media feed. I can immediately look at it and ask a question
Yeah.
rather than look at it and say,
What do you-
wow.
what do you
I
think
think
your
that's the
prediction
thing
is?
is the critical thinking muscle, because they talk specifically about how like some part of humanity is atrophied because of social media. I think that's kind of the muscle. That's like the education piece, because maybe they don't know calculus 1 or 2. Maybe they don't have a broad historical reference in their head from public education. Maybe they don't know the difference between an adverb and an adjective. Maybe we don't know math. Maybe we don't know scientific studies. But if you do know critical thinking, then maybe that can allow you to, at whatever information you can consume, do it with some sort of filter.
This makes me curious as to the future of how we discover truth and critical thinking, etc. Because I don't like we're already seeing it right now that so many people are like, well, I heard on a podcast that the podcast heard from another podcast that Trump said this.
So I
And
think
you're just like, well, unless it's a primary source, there's no, but nobody's being taught that critical thinking piece of absorbing the primary source, getting a feel for it yourself, and concluding something true, which you could say is
Sure.
the scientific method or critical thinking. But I don't, like, we're already just so far gone as to what truth is and what is false. And
Yeah, so I think you bring up a good point, Zach. A lot of times when we have these discussions, when we talk about what should happen, we're really talking about if we lived in an ideal world
yeah.
and if, we could just get the government to do what we want, right? That's never going to happen, right? But in the real world that we actually live in, what can we do? And I think going back to kind of what you guys are both saying is it is very difficult for us to teach our kids and teach our kids what is right or wrong or true or not true. But we can teach them how to successfully vet whether information is coming from a valid source.
Like that hits the nail on the head.
And
drop
know
that garbage.
Know
There's
when
only
to
like
take calculated
4
risks
people that I know
of
now
any
that are
variety
even
and kind.
thinking about that.
I want to get back to what
Anyway,
you're saying.
sorry.
I want to get back to that question, but I'm going to read the quote from near the end of the show, the documentary.
I'm going to stand
just
for this
said-
quote.
It said, critics
I'll join you.
are... Did you put your hand on your heart? Like,
It's a good quote. My butt's just hurting.
critics are the true optimists because they believe things could be better. And basically what I got from that quote was oftentimes critics or people who are constantly asking questions about the way things are or the things that we believe are true are seen as these pessimistic, constantly questioning, obnoxious people. And in the reality it is, I really honestly think, like I said earlier, when you're scrolling through your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed or Reddit or whatever it is, if a post comes across, the first thing that we shouldn't just consume it. The first thing we should do is ask a question and be critical of the information that comes across. And just like Brian hit it on the head, is we can't teach our kids everything that's true or not true. It's impossible. But we can teach them how to be critical about information and how to ask questions about information and how to absorb information that is more true.
And how to be willing
to change their mind.
to change your mind.
Yeah.
And how to be willing to make
It's
up
over,
your
Zach.
mind.
It's over,
No,
Zach.
because I think this is important. This is important because you talked about the need to have critical thinking to avoid living in like a failing reality, because it's like in an ideal world we could get people to do and think the way we want them to do and think, whatever. So yes, critical thinking is there for you to be able to explore other ideas, but as we've said, there comes a certain point in life where critical thinking will not get you all the answers right away. So you will need to decide to take the calculated risk of, and I don't want to make this sound just religious, but like believing in something, and living your life on that belief.
Calm down, Joseph Smith.
So, geez, that's such a good comment. Why is that so funny? That hit me. That struck me in the funny bone.
Dude, Zach, I pick on you a lot.
I
don't.
agree.
That's fine.
I agree with what you just said. There's the parable of, I just heard it this week, oddly enough. The parable of the donkey that basically was trapped between 2 bales of hay and was looking that way and was like, that hay looks good, but also that hay looks good. And he just stayed there until he starved. You know what I mean? Like, couldn't make a choice as to which hay bale he was going to go eat from, and instead just died in the middle. Obviously an extreme example, but I think the point being, at some point when you're you know what I mean?
You gotta be hot or
critic
cold.
of information. You've gotta choose. You gotta choose.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
Yes.
Ja, big summer blood.